The planet Myrith had all the charm of a raw steak left out too long in the sun. There was the juicy promise of nourishment under crisis. Today was different. She had a double shot of dread with a side of panic. The coffee machine in Research Base Elysium's break room had finally given up the ghost, just as the base's automated alert system blared to life. The irritatingly calm voice of the AI announced, "Unidentified signal detected, possible security breach." Because, of course, nothing says good morning like the potential for imminent doom. Verity slammed her mug down, muttering to the room full of half-asleep scientists, "Well, folks, looks like we're about to get more than our daily recommended dose of adrenaline." Dr. Roderick Roddy Flint, a geneticist with the social grace of a brick, glanced over. "Just what I needed. I was getting too comfortable with my quiet life of unraveling alien DNA and contemplating the futility of existence." "Right," Verity snapped, marching out of the break room, her lab coat flapping like a cape. She'd always thought capes were impractical, but today felt like a day for dramatics. The corridor leading to the operations room was as sterile and unwelcoming as the base director's glare. It was designed that way. Comfort was for people who weren't fiddling with the building blocks of life in a place that could be erased from maps faster than you could say government cover-up. She reached the operations room, where a dozen screens displayed everything from vital stats of the alien specimens to the base's security perimeter. "All right, what have we got?" she demanded. Sitting at the main console was Leon the Brain Kessler, a man whose intelligence was only rivaled by his complete lack of personal hygiene. He glanced up, a smirk playing on his lips. "Oh, just the usual. You know, an untraceable signal that could be some rival faction trying to steal our work, or maybe it's just cosmic noise mocking us for playing God." Verity rolled her eyes. "Great. Any chance it's the latter so I can go back to worrying about how we're going to fund next month's projects?" "Doubt it," Leon replied. "I've seen cosmic noise in this. This has intent, malicious intent, like a cat waiting to pounce on a particularly slow-moving mouse." Verity sighed. "Fantastic. Well, let's see what other surprises today has in store for us." Over in the corner, Marla Chan, the base's security lead and unofficial referee for the frequent ego clashes, was already donning her tactical gear. "I've got a bad feeling about this," she said, strapping on her sidearm with the kind of determination usually reserved for vendettas. "Don't worry, Marla," Verity quipped. "If it turns out to be hostile, we'll just throw Roddy at them. I'm sure they won't be able to handle his bedside manner." The intercom crackled to life again, the AI voice now tinged with what could only be described as smugness. "Signal analysis complete. Probability of hostile intent high." "You don't say," Roddy muttered, tapping furiously at his tablet, probably recalculating his odds of surviving the day. The team gathered around the main display, eyes scanning the data. The signal was complex, layered, the kind of thing that screamed sophisticated enemy with all the subtlety of a carnival barker. "Any chance this is a prank from one of the interns?" Marla asked, though they all knew the answer. The interns didn't have the skills, the access, or frankly, the guts to mess with something like this. "Only if they've suddenly developed a death wish," Leon replied dryly. Verity rubbed her temples, feeling the familiar throb of an impending headache. "Right, so what are our options?" "Besides panicking, I mean. We could try jamming the signal," Leon suggested, "but that might just provoke whoever's on the other end." "Lovely," Verity said. "So, provoke them or do nothing and hope they lose interest. It's like choosing between a rock and a hard place, except both are on fire." Marla crossed her arms, the picture of stoic determination. "I say we prepare for the worst. Lock down the base, arm everyone, and get ready to defend our work." "Sounds like a plan," Verity agreed. "Everyone, gear up. We're not letting some outside force waltz in and steal our research. Not after the hell we've been through to get this far." As the team sprang into action, the atmosphere shifted. The camaraderie born from shared danger mingled with the dark humor they clung to like a lifeline. After all, laughter was the best armor against the encroaching void threatening to consume them. "If we make it through this," Roddy said, grinning despite himself, "I'll finally take that vacation on terra firma. Maybe get a tan, remember what fresh air smells like." Leon chuckled, his eyes never leaving the screens. "And if we don't, well, at least we won't have to worry about those grant applications anymore." Verity shook her head, knowing full well the absurdity of their situation. "Let's just focus on making it through today, shall we?" In the shadow of the looming threat, Research Base Elysium was a place of contradictions. A fortress of science, a potential powder keg, a monument to humanity's relentless pursuit of knowledge. And yet, as they prepared for what felt like an inevitable confrontation, a tiny part of Verity couldn't help but wonder if they'd bitten off more than they could chew. The base entered lockdown mode, the steel shutters clanging shut with a finality that left no room for second thoughts. They were in for the long haul now, for better or worse. As the team took their positions, Verity glanced around the room, taking in the faces of her colleagues. These were the people she'd laughed with, argued with, and occasionally wanted to strangle. But they were also the people she'd trust with her life, and right now that meant everything. "All right, people," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Let's show whoever's out there that Elysium isn't just a fancy name. We're not going down without a fight." The Iors dragged on, a tense waiting game punctuated by the constant hum of equipment and the occasional sarcastic remark. Verity found herself pacing, a habit she hated but couldn't seem to break. Just as the nerves were beginning to fray, the screen flashed with new data. Leon leaned in, his eyes narrowing. "Signals changing. It's like they're trying to communicate." "Communicate?" Verity echoed, skepticism laced through her words. "With what, a brick wall?" Leon shrugged, the grin back on his face. "Hey, maybe they're just as curious about us as we are about them." "Or maybe," Roddy interjected, "they're just trying to soften us up before the main event." Verity considered the options, none of which were particularly appealing. "Either way, we need to figure out what they are after, and fast." The signal's complexity continued to evolve, each new layer adding to the puzzle. It was a dance of cryptic messages and encrypted signals, a game of cat and mouse with stakes higher than any of them were comfortable acknowledging. As the Iors bled into one another, a grim realization settled over the team. This wasn't just science anymore, it was survival. And in a place like Elysium, survival meant being prepared to fight. The tension was palpable, a living entity that coiled around them like a snake. But beneath it all was a defiant hope, a stubborn refusal to back down. They'd come too far, sacrificed too much, to let it all slip through their fingers now. And then, just as the anticipation reached a fever pitch, the signal shifted again. This time it was unmistakable, a demand for surrender. Marla snorted, crossing her arms. "Surrender? They really think we're gonna roll over that easily?" "Not a chance," Verity replied, her eyes alight with determination. "We'll show them what happens when you threaten our home." Leon tapped a few keys, the screens lighting up with new data. "Looks like they're gearing up for a show of force." "Better buckle up." Roddy glanced around, his expression a mix of fear and excitement. "Well, it's been a pleasure working with you all. If this is the end, let's make sure it leaves a hell of a mark." Verity nodded, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Let's give them something to remember. Elysium won't fall without a fight." As the team prepared for whatever lay ahead, the atmosphere crackled with resolve. They were ready to defend what they'd built, to stand against the darkness threatening to consume them. And in that moment, as the air hummed with anticipation, Verity knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. The base shuddered, a distant rumble hinting at the storm brewing outside. But inside there was only determination, only the fierce will to survive. Because at the end of the day, Elysium wasn't just a research base. It was a testament to human ingenuity, a symbol of defiance against the unknown. And they weren't about to let it go without a fight. The air inside Research Base Elysium was as tense as a politician caught in a lie. The kind of tension you could cut with a knife if only anyone had packed one alongside their sterile lab instruments and moral ambiguity. Verity Astor stared at the monitors, the chaotic signals reflecting in her eyes like unreadable tea leaves. The atmosphere was electric, and not in a good way, more like the kind of static that makes your hair stand up right before a lightning strike. "Hey, Verity, did you hear?" Leon, the brain Kessler, piped up from his corner, where the scent of old coffee and something far less pleasant lingered. "They say if you stare at an unsolvable problem long enough, it might just solve itself. Or maybe that's just you going mad." Verity smirked, though it was the kind of smile that barely reached the eyes. "I think that just means you need glasses, Leon, or a shower." Leon chuckled, the sort of laugh that suggested he hadn't seen the inside of a bathroom in a while and didn't particularly care. "Touché. So, what's the plan?" "Besides hoping for a miracle and praying I'm wrong about this signal being bad news." "Bad news is the only news I trust," Marla Chan interjected, her sidearm strapped tighter than a miser's purse. "What's the status on our mysterious signal?" "Well, here's the kicker," Leon said, tapping furiously at his keyboard. "If I'm reading this right, and let's face it, I usually am, this signal is bouncing back to us from inside the base." Verity leaned forward, a frown creasing her forehead. "Inside the base? Someone's piggybacking off our systems." Marla's eyes narrowed, her fingers twitching towards her weapon as if itching for an excuse to use it. "So you're saying we might have a mole in our midst?" Leon shrugged, a movement that spoke volumes about his indifference to social niceties. "Could be, or maybe just a tech-savvy mouse. Either way, someone's got a backdoor into our systems." "Great. Just what we need," Verity muttered, her sarcasm as thick as the layer of dust on Leon's console. "A traitor on top of everything else." Before anyone could dig deeper into their collective distrust, the door slid open with a hiss, admitting Rook Talon, the base's brilliant, albeit unpredictable, engineer. If Verity was the team's brain, Rook was its wild card, an inventive genius with the restraint of a kid in a candy store. "Did someone say we've got a tech problem?" Rook asked, his tone suggesting he'd overheard more than that. "Because I live for solving puzzles, especially the explosive kind." "Explosives, right," Roddy Flint chimed in, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Turns out we've got an internal leak. Someone's been sending signals from inside the base." Rook grinned, a mischievous light in his eyes. "Sounds like my kind of party. More like a funeral," Verity corrected. "One we're all invited to if we don't figure this out." In another corner of the universe, global powers were beginning to sniff around like sharks catching the scent of blood. Their interest in Elysium's work was a ticking time bomb, ready to go off the moment someone got greedy enough to push the button. And in the world of high-stakes alien research, greed was a perennial guest at the table. "Word's out," Marla said, eyes scanning the latest intel reports. "We've got some big players sniffing around. Looks like everyone wants a piece of the alien pie." "Terrific," Verity said, deadpan. "As if dealing with internal betrayal wasn't enough, now we've got the whole world wanting in." "See it this way," Rook offered, with a glint only a mad scientist could muster. "At least we're popular." "Yeah, too popular," Leon replied. "The kind of popular that gets you shot in the back if you're not careful." Verity's mind raced, 1,000 scenarios playing out like bad sci-fi reruns. The base was supposed to be a haven for scientific discovery, not a battleground, but it seemed they were well past that now. "All right," she said, rallying the troops like a general with a caffeine addiction. "We need to secure our data first. If someone's in here playing double agent, we can't let them walk away with our work." "What about contacting the higher-ups?" Roddy suggested, though his tone implied he wasn't exactly thrilled at the prospect. "Could get them to send in backup. Or they could decide we're expendable," Marla replied, her expression grim. "Better we handle this ourselves. Less chance of us ending up as collateral damage." As they debated their next steps, Rook was already fiddling with the wiring of the base's communication hub. "I can set up a firewall the likes of which even hell would envy. Buy us some time, at least." "Do it," Verity agreed. And while you're at it, see if you can trace that signal. I want to know who's been playing both sides. The Iors ticked by, each one heavier than the last. Elysium, with its sterile corridors and whirring machines, felt more like a prison with each passing minute. Yet there was no time to dwell on the suffocating tension, only the pressing need for action. Leon, keep monitoring external communications, Verity instructed. If anyone else tries to get clever, I want to know about it yesterday. Leon nodded, his fingers dancing over the keyboard. You got it, boss. And Marla, Verity continued, I need you to run a security sweep. See if you can find anyone who doesn't belong. Marla smirked, a deadly promise in her eyes. I've got a knack for sniffing out rats. As they split up to tackle their respective tasks, Verity found herself alone with Rook, who was elbow-deep in circuitry and wires. You really think we can trust everyone here? She asked, her voice low. Rook paused, considering. Trust is a luxury, not a necessity, but at the end of the day, we're all we've got. It was a sobering thought, one that lingered like the taste of bad coffee. Verity knew that the strength of their team lay not in blind trust, but in the grudging respect built through trial and error, and the occasional near-death experience. The base, normally a hive of scientific discovery, now felt like the eye of a brewing storm. Outside, global powers edged closer, each one driven by the promise of alien technology. Inside, the threat of betrayal simmered, a pot on the verge of boiling over. Signals traces back, Leon called out, breaking the tension. Got it narrowed down to sub-level B. If there's a mole, that's where they'll be. Marla was already moving, a whirlwind of efficiency. I'll gather a team, we'll flush them out. Be careful, Verity warned. We don't know how desperate they might be. Desperate people do stupid things, Rook pointed out, though his tone was more observational than concerned. And let's face it, we're all a little desperate here. As Marla and her team headed out, Verity turned back to Rook. If this goes south, I need you ready to blow the servers. We can't let our work fall into the wrong hands. Rook raised an eyebrow, his grin as sharp as a blade. Blowing things up. Now you're speaking my language. The base seemed to hold its breath as Marla's team descended into sub-level B, the tension palpable. Minutes stretched into eternities until finally Marla's voice crackled over the comms. Found them, or rather him. Him? Verity repeated, incredulous. Who? One of our own. John Mercer, Marla replied, the disdain in her voice clear. Caught him red-handed, trying to send out more data. John Mercer, a quiet, unassuming tech who had never once stood out in any way except for his ability to blend into the background. The kind of man you'd forget was in the room until he spoke. Guess it's always the quiet ones, Leon said, shaking his head. Never trust a guy who doesn't complain about the coffee. Verity sighed, the weight of the situation crashing down around her shoulders. Bring him in, we need answers. As Marla marched the trader into the operations room, Verity regarded him with a mixture of disbelief and disappointment. John, why? He shrugged, a strange calm about him. Why not? Everyone's looking for an edge, Verity. I just decided to cash in my chips before the table got flipped. And what was your plan exactly? Verity asked, struggling to keep her temper in check. Sell us out and live happily ever after. Something like that, John admitted, with the air of a man who had already accepted his fate. But hey, guess not everyone gets the happily ever after. No, they don't, Verity agreed, her tone hard. Especially not you. As John was led away, the reality of their situation loomed larger than ever. Trust was shattered. Allegiances were tested, and the world outside pounded on the gates, eager to tear down what little they had left. And yet, despite everything, a defiant spark lingered in the air, a shared understanding that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Elysium might be under siege, but it was still their home. As Verity turned back to the screens, her mind racing with possibilities, she felt the weight of those around her, friends, colleagues, allies in the storm. They were all she had, and she'd be damned if she let anyone take that away. All right, she said, her voice steady. Let's get back to work. We've still got a base to defend. Rook glanced up from his tinkering, a sly grin on his face. And beer to drink, assuming the world doesn't end. Leon snorted, the sound almost a laugh. If it does, at least we won't have to deal with the coffee machine anymore. Verity chuckled, the sound as tired and resilient as she felt. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. The base might have been a pressure cooker of tension and mistrust, but it was also a crucible for something more, a testament to human ingenuity, a beacon of hope against the darkness, and perhaps most importantly, a stubborn refusal to surrender. And as they regrouped, there was a shared understanding that come hell or high water, they'd make it through. Together. Because at the end of the day, Elysium wasn't just a research base. It was theirs. The air in Elysium was thick with a cocktail of tension, paranoia, and the foul stench of burnt coffee beans. Again, the coffee machine had given up its ghost ages ago, but nobody had bothered to inform the staff of its demise. As far as the team was concerned, the damn contraption was just another piece of junk that had betrayed them, along with John Mercer and his Judas routine. Doctor, Verity Astor found herself glaring at the broken machine like it was somehow responsible for all their woes. Maybe it was. Maybe its sole function was to remind them they were one clogged filter away from chaos. If this thing were a person, it'd be John Mercer, she muttered under her breath, her tone sharper than a scalpel. Roddy Flint, who had perfected the art of loitering without purpose, raised an eyebrow. I'd say John had more personality. That thing just sits there useless and bloated. Speaking of bloated, Verity said, turning her attention back to the matter at hand, how's the sabotage situation looking? Like a dumpster fire on a hydrogen planet, Roddy replied. Someone's been having a field day with our systems. Everything's glitching like a bad VR game. Great, Verity deadpanned. Just what we need, our own little apocalypse simulation. Across the room, Rook Talon was buried in a pile of wires and alien tech, his eyes gleaming with manic enthusiasm. The kind of guy who'd look at a bomb and wonder how to make it explode in prettier colors. I'm working on something, he said, not looking up. A little present for our saboteur friends. Rook, if that present involves anything that goes boom, maybe run it by us first, Verity suggested, her voice laced with equal parts admiration and exasperation. Relax, it's a prototype, Rook replied, grinning like a lunatic. A little piece of alien tech I've been fiddling with. Might just give us the edge we need. Verity prayed it wouldn't give them an edge over their own toes. Just make sure it doesn't blow us all to hell. Meanwhile, Leon the Brain Kessler was at his usual station, absorbed in the chaos of code and numbers. The air around him smelled vaguely of sweat and stale snacks, like a nerd convention in a power outage. I'm trying to firewall us against further breaches, he said, his fingers dancing like a spider on a hot plate. Assuming Rook doesn't fry the system first. Hey, I resemble that remark, Rook shot back with a wink. The banter was interrupted by the soft whoosh of the door opening, revealing a slender figure wrapped in a cloak of mystery and deceit, like a bad novel that couldn't decide on a genre. Ivo Cairn strolled in, all diplomatic poise and cunning smiles that could slice through steel. I hear you've been having some trouble, Ivo said, his voice smooth enough to slick back hair. Thought you might need an extra hand. More like an extra knife, Marla Chan observed dryly, arms crossed, sidearm firmly in place. What's a diplomat doing in our little corner of hell? Call it curiosity, Ivo replied, his grin as charming as a rattlesnake's. Or maybe I just like being where the action is. The action's all yours if you want it, Verity said, narrowing her eyes. We've got sabotage, espionage, and a broken coffee machine. Take your pick. Sounds like a party, Ivo said, easing into the situation with the casual arrogance of someone who never gets caught in the rain. I'm sure I can find a way to be useful. Useful like a screen door on a spaceship, Roddy muttered under his breath. Ignoring the jab, Ivo continued, I've also brought some intel. There's chatter among the higher-ups. Seems they're getting antsy. Our little incident here has made waves. Terrific, Verity sighed. Nothing like bureaucracy to really kick us when we're down. Just thought you should know, Ivo said, his tone dripping with mock sincerity. Wouldn't want you to get caught off guard. As he turned to saunter away, Marla's voice cut through the room like a well-aimed bullet. If you're planning on sticking around, keep your hands where we can see them. Any funny business and you'll be breathing vacuum. Noted, Ivo replied, still maddeningly calm. I assure you I'm here to help. Like a shark helps a seal, Leon quipped, fingers never pausing their frantic dance over the keyboard. The tension simmered, the team exchanging glances, a silent agreement to watch their backs as well as each other's. Trust was a currency none of them could afford to spend freely. Not with a potential snake in their midst. Hours slinked by, each one heavy with the weight of unsolved mysteries and the looming shadow of outside threats. Verity found herself pacing, her mind a whirl of strategies and worst-case scenarios. She needed a solution, not just a patch to hold them over, but a solid plan that wouldn't crumble like stale bread. Rook, she called out, how's that prototype coming along? Nearly there, Rook replied, his voice muffled from beneath a mess of cables. Just need to tweak a few more things. Do it fast, Verity urged. We might not have much time. As if on cue, the automated alert system blared to life, its serene voice a mockery of the chaos it heralded. Security breach detected on sub-level B. Please proceed with caution. Looks like the fun's starting without us, Marla noted, already moving for the exit. Everyone, stay sharp, Verity ordered, adrenaline sparking through her veins. We handle this quick and clean. They moved as a unit, a ragtag band of scientists and misfits thrust into the role of defenders. As they approached sub-level B, the air grew colder, the fluorescent lights flickering like they too were contemplating jumping ship. Watch your step, Marla whispered, her eyes scanning the shadows for threats. Could be an ambush. You think, Roddy replied, voice thick with sarcasm. I was hoping for a welcome parade. The corridor twisted and turned, each corner a potential death trap. Until finally they reached the source of the breach, a junction box pried open, wires spilling out like metallic entrails. Well, there's your problem, Leon said, kneeling to inspect the damage. Looks like someone's been playing electrician without a license. Can you fix it? Verity asked, hope mingling with impatience. Eventually, Leon replied, already working his magic. Just need time. Time's the one thing we don't have, Rook reminded him, his hands twitching with the need to act. As Leon worked, Verity's eyes caught a flicker of movement, a shadow slipping away like a thief in the night. There, she shouted, pointing down the dimly lit corridor. Marla was in motion before anyone else could react, her steps silent and deadly. Stay here, she ordered, her voice a blade. I'll handle this. The team watched her go, tension ratcheting up another notch. It was a gamble, sending Marla off alone, but they all knew she was their best shot at catching the intruder. Minutes dragged on, each one a heavy footstep towards potential disaster. Verity paced, her mind racing with plans and contingencies. Rook, what's the ETA on that prototype? Almost done, Rook replied, his hands a blur of motion. Just need to calibrate the damn thing. As if summoned by his words, Marla returned, a grim satisfaction etched across her face. Got the bastard, she reported, dragging a scrawny figure behind her. Caught him trying to skedaddle. The intruder squirmed, his face a mask of defiance and fear. Verity recognized him, another nameless techie who'd flown under the radar until now. What's your game? She demanded, her voice ice. Game? He spat, eyes darting like a cornered rat. This isn't a game, it's survival. Survival at the cost of everyone else. Verity challenged, her patience fraying. Who are you working for? Does it matter? The techie shot back. You'll all be dead soon anyway. Cheery, Roddy said, rolling his eyes. I love how the apocalypse brings out the optimists. Get him out of here, Verity instructed, turning back to Rook. We need that weapon ready now. Just finished, Rook announced, holding up a device that glowed with an unsettling energy. This beauty should give us the upper hand. Assuming it doesn't blow us all up, Leon added, more out of habit than genuine concern. Rook grinned, the gleam of madness in his eyes. Have a little faith. Faith isn't exactly on the menu, Verity replied, taking the weapon with a mix of hope and dread. But it'll have to do. The air was electric, charged with the collective tension of a team pushed to its limits. With enemies both inside and outside their walls, every moment counted, every decision could tip the balance. And in the heart of Elysium, they prepared to fight back, to reclaim their sanctuary from the clutches of greed and betrayal. Because at the end of the day, when the chips were down and the odds were stacked against them, they were all they had, and they weren't going down without a fight. The air in Elysium was charged like a live wire, the tension strung tighter than a miser's purse. Verity surveyed the room, Leon punching keys like a pianist on a coke binge, Marla cleaning her sidearm with the care one might give a cherished heirloom, and Roddy, well, still being Roddy, hovering around as if he was waiting for someone to invent a miracle pill for social ineptitude. "All right, folks. Our little rat says we're in for a storm," Verity stated with all the enthusiasm of a tax auditor at a rock concert. "Anyone got an umbrella, or are we doing this the hard way?" "Umbrellas are for optimists," Roddy quipped, leaning against a console, all casual disrespect and dry wit. "I brought a snorkel." "Keep it handy," Leon said, his eyes glued to the screen. "Our systems are one hiccup away from a full-blown seizure. If this place goes belly up, it'll be a wet exit." Amidst the chaos, Ivo Cairn stood aloof, a diplomat in a den of thieves, if thieves were scientists with questionable hygiene. He watched the room like a chess player eyeing a board, every piece a potential move, every move a potential checkmate. "As entertaining as your antics are, I'm afraid the situation outside is deteriorating faster than a politician's promises," Ivo interjected smoothly, his smile annoyingly intact. "There's a faction forming against our little operation here. Not everyone's tickled pink about the idea of alien tech in our hands." "And let me guess," Marla said, not bothering to hide her disdain. "You're here to play both sides, right? What's your angle, Cairn?" "Survival," Ivo replied, his voice like silk over steel. "Same as yours, I prefer to keep my options open. More like your exits," Verity muttered, casting a wary glance his way. "But if you've got intel, spill it. We don't have time for your cloak and dagger routine." Ivo's smile widened. "The higher-ups are worried. Some think we're playing with fire, others with a full-blown inferno. They're hedging their bets, and that means factions forming quicker than bacteria in a petri dish." "Great," Verity sighed. "Just what we need, more cooks in the kitchen, and everyone's brought their own recipe for disaster." "Speaking of cooking, the prototype's ready for its debut," Rook chimed in, holding up his creation like a proud parent at a science fair. The device hummed ominously, glowing with a light that suggested it might just be sentient and plotting world domination. "I call it the debugger. Let's hope it doesn't debug us out of existence," Leon added, not looking up from his screen. "How does it work?" "Basic principle. It disrupts electronics in a localized area," Rook explained, eyes glinting with the nerdy glee of a kid in a candy store. "Think of it as a tactical EMP but with flair." "Flair," Marla echoed with a skeptical eyebrow. "I swear if that thing sings and dances—" "No worries," Rook assured her. "It's calibrated to only disrupt what's necessary, mostly." "Mostly," Verity repeated deadpan. "Because mostly safe is just what we need right now." The sound of distant shouting filtered through the thick walls, a reminder of the chaos brewing beyond their immediate crises. Elysium was starting to feel less like a research base and more like a pressure cooker set to explode, and they were running out of spoons to stir the pot. "Right, let's get this show on the road," Verity declared, pulling herself together with all the reluctance of a cat facing a bath. "We need to take control back and quickly. Leon, you keep us plugged into what's happening. Rook, make sure that toy of yours is ready to roar. Marla, you're with me. And Roddy, try not to break anything." "Wouldn't dream of it," Roddy replied with a mock salute, as if he hadn't broken more equipment than anyone else in the room. Verity and Marla moved out, the corridors of Elysium echoing with their footsteps, a reminder that even steel walls couldn't dampen the sense of impending doom. The base was splitting, factions forming faster than alliances at a reality TV reunion. And amidst the chaos, it was anyone's guess who'd end up on top. The prototype was their best shot, a Hail Mary in a game no one wanted to play. But desperation breeds creativity, and with any luck, it wouldn't blow them all to bits. Or worse, make things awkward at the next staff meeting. As they approached the heart of the turmoil, Verity couldn't help but reflect on the irony of their situation. Scientists, soldiers, and a diplomat thrown together in a mess that had more in common with a dysfunctional family reunion than a high-stakes mission. "Think we'll make it out of this one?" Marla asked, her tone more curious than concerned. "Depends," Verity replied dryly. "On how you define making it out. Alive is a start. Sane. That ship's probably sailed." "You know," Marla mused, her lips twitching into a rare smile, "some people pay good money for simulations like this. And they say we're the crazy ones," Verity chuckled, the sound more grim than genuine. "Let's just hope this ends better than it started." In the control room, Leon's fingers danced over the keyboard, each keystroke a potential lifeline. The monitors flashed with warnings, the automated alert system making its presence known with a frequency that suggested it was auditioning for an alarm clock roll. Rook was in his element, tweaking the debugger with the enthusiasm of a kid given free rein in a toy store. The glow from the device cast strange shadows over his face, hinting at the precarious balance between genius and madness. "You sure this thing's not gonna fry our own systems?" Leon asked, eyeing the device with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Positive," Rook replied, though his grin suggested a healthy dose of wishful thinking. "I've accounted for most variables. Besides, where's the fun without a little risk? Last time someone said that, we ended up with a fungal outbreak in the cafeteria," Roddy noted, joining the fray with his usual lack of grace. "Ah, but this is different," Rook assured him, patting the debugger like a trusty steed. "This one doesn't involve mold spores. Probably." "Probably," Leon echoed, shaking his head. "Guess that's as good as it gets around here." Back in the corridors, Verity and Marla found themselves in the middle of a standoff. A dozen or so disgruntled faces greeted them, the kind of group that had seen too many reruns of Revolution and fancied themselves the next big thing. Well, if it isn't the cavalry," one of them sneered, a burly man with a face that looked like it had been introduced to a brick wall once too often. "Come to join the party." "Not exactly," Verity replied, keeping her voice level, her eyes scanning the faces for any sign of reason. "We're here to make sure no one does anything stupid." "Too late for that," the man shot back, waving the crowd forward. "Time to take matters into our own hands." "Great," Marla muttered under her breath. Mob mentality at its finest. The situation was a powder keg, and Verity was painfully aware that all it needed was a spark. She glanced at Marla, who nodded subtly, her hand hovering near her sidearm, ready for the worst. "Listen," Verity began, raising her voice to be heard over the growing unrest. "We're all in this together, like it or not. This isn't the way to fix things." "Easy for you to say," another voice piped up, young and fiery. "You're the ones playing God with alien tech. What about the rest of us?" "We're trying to protect everyone," Verity argued, though she knew her words were about as persuasive as a wet napkin. "But we need time." "Time's up," the burly man growled, stepping forward with all the grace of a grizzly. "Either you're with us or you're against us." "Fine, be against us," Marla snapped, raising her weapon with a steady hand. "But know this, if you try anything stupid, you'll regret it." The tension was thick enough to cut with a laser scalpel, each side poised for a clash that could shatter everything. And amidst it all, Verity felt the weight of leadership pressing down harder than ever. Before anyone could make the first move, the sound of a distant explosion rippled through the corridors, a reminder of the chaos that had become their new normal. The debugger had made its debut, and the results were as unpredictable as their situation. In the control room, Rook watched the monitors light up like a Christmas tree, the device having done its job with all the finesse of a bull in a china shop. Systems flickered, went dark, then blazed back to life, the chaos outside mirrored by the controlled anarchy within. "Looks like it works," Leon remarked, trying and failing to sound nonchalant. "Mostly, mostly," Rook echoed, his grin wide enough to rival a Cheshire cat. "And now we wait." The air felt different, a new tension settling in, one born not from fear but from anticipation. The factions were in place, the battle lines drawn, and in the heart of Elysium, humanity's finest stared down the abyss, ready to face whatever came next. Because when you're stranded in a pit of snakes, the only way out is through. Elysium had officially gone from a research base to a circus without the fun clowns. The corridors echoed with chaos and confusion, and not the usual kind that came when someone misfiled the coffee requisitions. No, this was full-blown pandemonium, the kind that made you yearn for the mundane misery of a broken coffee machine. In the heart of this madness, Verity found herself flanked by Marla, their path blocked by a mob with more enthusiasm than sense. The burly leader, who clearly had a face that should come with a warning label, was gesturing like he was conducting an orchestra of dissent. "Verity, what's the plan?" Marla asked, her voice barely a whisper, her hand still hovering near her sidearm like a protective mother hen. "Hope for the best, prepare for the worst," Verity muttered in reply. "And maybe kick Roddy later for jinxing us." Before Verity could further contemplate the myriad ways their day had gone to hell, she felt a cold barrel at her back. She stiffened and glanced sideways at Marla, whose expression had turned to one of disbelief mixed with a dollop of "I told you so." "Guess the cavalry's arrived," drawled John Mercer, the human equivalent of a lukewarm bath. He must have been the one teaching Sneak 101 to the rest of them. "Mercer," Verity said, her voice dripping with as much contempt as she could muster, which was a lot. "I should have known you weren't just a broken coffee machine." "I'm full of surprises," Mercer replied with a smirk that could curdle milk. "Now, why don't you be a good doc and come along quietly?" "Quietly? That's not really my style," Verity retorted, feeling Marla tense beside her. "Don't worry, Marla," Mercer added, his smirk widening like a crack in a dam. "Guns down." "We just want to talk, right?" Marla said, her voice as dry as a Martian summer. "Talk with guns." But they were outnumbered, and for once even Marla knew when to hold her fire. Verity exchanged a resigned glance with her, the kind that said, "We'll get through this, one disaster at a time." As they were led away, Verity reflected on her leadership strategy. Step 1. Don't get kidnapped. Step 2. If Step 1 fails, have a Plan B. Unfortunately, she was fresh out of plans, and improvisation was about to become her new best friend. Meanwhile, in the control room, Rook was in a symbiotic relationship with chaos. The debugger had done its thing, and now he was left to pick up the pieces, or at least piece together something that wouldn't get them all killed. Leon was furiously typing away, his fingers a blur. "You know," he remarked, not looking up, "if I survive this, I'm gonna rename this place to Cluster." "Think we should have a say in that?" Roddy asked, appearing out of nowhere like a fungus in the back of the fridge. "Considering I'm the one keeping us online, nope," Leon replied with a snort. Rook, meanwhile, was feeling the weight of the world, or at least Elysium, on his shoulders. He had one job: make sure the debugger didn't turn their insides to goo. "Ivo's gonna be sniffing around soon enough," he muttered to himself. "Gotta keep this under wraps." "You talking to yourself again, Rook?" Leon quipped. "Helps me think." "And you're no help," Rook shot back, though there was a hint of camaraderie in his voice. But camaraderie wasn't going to keep Ivo from making his move. In the midst of this tech-driven maelstrom, Rook found himself alone, defending a prototype that meant the difference between survival and becoming cosmic dust. As if on cue, Ivo Cairn made his entrance, gliding into the room with the effortless grace of someone who never had to worry about doing his own dirty work. His suit was immaculate, his expression one of thinly veiled amusement. "Ivo," Rook greeted, his tone as warm as a cryogenic chamber. "Rook," Ivo replied smoothly. "I see you've got things under control." "Working on it," Rook said, managing to keep his voice steady despite the urge to throttle the smug diplomat. "What do you want, Ivo?" "Just checking in on our little project," Ivo replied with a smile that could sell ice to a penguin. "Want to make sure it's in safe hands." "Safe as a toddler with a flamethrower," Leon muttered under his breath, earning a snicker from Roddy. "Well," Ivo continued, ignoring the peanut gallery, "seems like you've got quite the operation here." "Mind if I oversee?" Rook clenched his jaw, the muscles ticking in a way that suggested violence wasn't off the table. "We're good, Ivo, but thanks for the offer. Consider it more of a non-negotiable arrangement," Ivo pressed, his smile never wavering, though the steel beneath it was unmistakable. "Non-negotiable," Rook echoed, his mind racing through options faster than a caffeine-fueled mathematician. "Non-negotiable," Ivo confirmed, his gaze fixed on the debugger like a hawk eyeing a particularly juicy mouse. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on, each man locked in a silent battle of wills. The fate of Elysium, and possibly a lot more, hung in the balance. Back in the bowels of the base, Verity and Marla found themselves shoved into a makeshift holding area. The place was barely big enough to swing a cat, provided the cat was okay with claustrophobia. "Told you it was a trap," Marla said, her voice laced with grim satisfaction. "You did," Verity admitted, rubbing her wrists where the restraints had been a bit too snug for comfort. "But hey, at least we're not dead. Always look on the bright side," Marla quipped, sinking to the floor with a grace born of too many similar situations. "Any sign of rescue on the horizon? Considering our usual rescuers are probably knee-deep in their own mess." "Don't hold your breath," Verity replied, settling next to her with a sigh. As they sat there, surrounded by the detritus of rebellion and discontent, Verity couldn't help but let out a short, bitter laugh. "Of all the places to be taken hostage, Elysium wasn't what I pictured." "Yeah, well, at least we can cross caught in an interstellar coup off our bucket lists," Marla said, the corners of her mouth twitching upwards in a hint of a smile. "What's next, you think?" Verity asked, not really expecting an answer. "Well, if we're lucky, some idiot pulls a lever and blows this whole circus sky high," Marla replied, checking her sidearm with a practiced motion. "And if we're not, then we live to see another day in this glorious mess," Marla answered, her tone as dry as sandpaper. "Optimistic as ever, I see," Verity said, though there was a warmth beneath the sarcasm. "Hey, gotta keep some kind of hope alive, right?" Marla replied, her expression softening for just a moment. "Even if it's buried under a mountain of crap." As they sat in their makeshift cell, Verity found herself reflecting on the ragtag group back in the control room. Each of them had a role to play, whether they liked it or not. And despite the odds, she felt a glimmer of something that might just be hope, or at least a stubborn refusal to give up. Meanwhile, in the control room, Rook's standoff with Ivo had reached a critical juncture. Ivo, with his usual unflappable demeanor, was eyeing the debugger with the kind of interest that usually preceded something getting blown up. "We need to work together on this, Rook," Ivo said, his tone practically dripping with insincerity. "For the greater good." "Funny, that sounds a lot like I need what's mine and you're in my way," Rook replied, his fingers twitching as if itching to throw a punch instead of a switch. "Think of it as a collaboration," Ivo continued, his smile as fixed as a statue's. "Call it whatever you want," Rook shot back, "but I'm not handing this over." Ivo let out a small, patronizing laugh. "Oh, Rook, you always were the idealist." "And you were always the snake," Rook returned, eyes hard as steel. The silence that followed was charged, each man sizing up the other like gladiators in the arena. But before the tension could snap, Leon's monitor let out a warning beep, the kind that suggested someone had just taken a very wrong turn on the highway to hell. Guys," Leon said, his voice cutting through the air like a cannonball. "We've got a problem." "Just one?" Roddy quipped, earning himself a withering look from Leon. "One big enough that if we don't act, we're all gonna be toast," Leon said, his fingers flying over the keys in a desperate attempt to salvage something from the digital wreckage. Rook glanced at Ivo, who raised an eyebrow in a silent "now what?" The uneasy truce between them was shattered, replaced by a mutual understanding that whatever was coming, it wasn't good. Options? Rook asked, his voice strained but steady. Run or die, Leon suggested, though the humor in his voice was as thin as paper. Running sounds good, Roddy added, backing away from the monitors like they might explode. Stay or go, we need to decide now, Rook said, focusing on the task at hand rather than the impending doom. As if on cue, the base shuddered, the lights flickering ominously like a horror movie cliché. The instability that had been brewing outside was making its presence known, and it was only a matter of time before Elysium came crashing down. Despite the chaos, Rook's mind was clear. They needed to secure the debugger, keep it out of Ivo's hands, because if the diplomat got his way, everything they'd worked for would be lost. Leon, Roddy, grab what you can, Rook ordered, his voice cutting through the turmoil. Ivo, if you're sticking around, make yourself useful. Helpful as ever, Rook, Ivo replied, though his expression was one of grim determination. Together, they scrambled to gather essentials, their movements a frantic dance against the backdrop of a crumbling base. The tension was palpable, each step taken with the knowledge that they were teetering on the edge of disaster. Back in their cell, Verity and Marla listened as the sounds of chaos grew louder. Whatever was happening, it was escalating and fast. You hear that? Marla asked, her ears tuned to the rumble of trouble. Hard to miss, Verity replied, her mind racing with possibilities. Think they're trying to rescue us, or they're gonna blow us all to kingdom come, Marla said with a half-smile. Optimism, Marla. You wear it well, thanks, I try. The two exchanged a glance, their expressions a mix of resignation and determination. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in Elysium reached a fever pitch. The base was a tinderbox, ready to ignite with the slightest provocation. And in the heart of this chaos, Rook realized that they had one chance to turn the tide. Ready? He asked, his voice steady despite the storm brewing around them. As ready as we'll ever be, Leon replied, though his hands trembled slightly. Let's do this, Roddy added, his usual sarcasm replaced by a rare moment of seriousness. With a nod, Rook initiated the sequence, the debugger springing to life with a hum that seemed to resonate through the very bones of the base. The lights flickered, the air crackled with energy, and for a moment time seemed to stand still. Then, with a shattering roar, the device's power unleashed, a tidal wave of disruption that swept through Elysium like a cleansing fire. Systems went haywire, alarms blared, and the chaos reached its zenith. And in the midst of it all, Verity and Marla felt the ground tremble beneath them, the world tilting precariously as the power of the debugger washed over the base. For a heartbeat, everything hung in the balance. Then, as if by some miracle or sheer dumb luck, Elysium began to stabilize, the immediate threat averted, though the danger was far from over. As the dust settled, Rook stood amidst the wreckage, the debugger clutched in his hands like a lifeline. They'd survived for now, but the battle was far from won. With a determined nod, our Rook Talon wiped the sweat from his brow with a sleeve that hadn't been washed in too many shifts, his eyes darting like a caffeinated scourge. The debugger buzzed angrily in his hands like it held a personal grudge against him, and he couldn't blame it. In the chaos, he realized he had to do something heroically stupid, or stupidly heroic, depending on how this ended. All right, brain trust, Rook called out, stepping over what used to be a state-of-the-art console, now just a smoldering hunk of regret. We're going to pull Verity and Marla out of whatever hole they've been stuffed into. How, exactly? Leon the Brain Kessler asked, looking up from a monitor that was as fried as his last attempt at cooking. With duct tape and a prayer, Roddy suggested, his tone so dry it could have soaked up the Pacific. More like with a little bit of this, Rook said, raising the debugger, and a lot of hope that our mysterious saboteur left the back door to their system slightly ajar. Hope, Leon snorted, the opiate of the desperate. Desperate times, desperate measures, Rook retorted. He set the debugger down on a makeshift stand. His lunchbox, currently empty, having valiantly given up its contents to the chaos, and started connecting it to the few functioning terminals left. "Just make sure your measures don't kill us all," Roddy muttered, leaning back in his chair with the grace of a man who had long since accepted his fate. Meanwhile, in their improvised prison, Verity Astor examined their surroundings with the kind of scrutiny a cat would reserve for a particularly suspicious cucumber. The walls were featureless, the ceiling low enough to give her claustrophobia nightmares, and the single door remained stubbornly locked. "Any bright ideas?" Marla asked, fiddling with her sidearm, which was about as useful right now as a chocolate teapot. "Always," Verity replied, her tone a cocktail of sarcasm and defiance. "But whether they're bright enough to get us out of here, that's the million-credit question." "Well, if there's one thing life has taught me," Marla said, stretching out her legs, "it's that you can't underestimate the power of a well-timed leap of faith." "Or a hefty bribe," Verity added, rolling her eyes. The air in the cell was thick enough to choke on, and the distant rumble of instability outside did nothing to soothe the tension. They could only hope the cavalry, despite being a ragtag bunch of misfits, was on its way. Back in the control room, the cavalry was indeed assembling, albeit with all the grace of a drunken giraffe. Rook's fingers danced over the keyboard, improvising faster than a jazz musician on a caffeine high. Leon hovered nearby, monitoring a separate set of screens with the attention one might reserve for a fresh lottery ticket. "Okay, I think I've found a way to piggyback their signal without setting off 1,000 alarms," Rook announced, his voice doing its best to sound optimistic. "And by piggyback, you mean?" Leon prompted, ever the skeptic. "We hijacked their communication network long enough to send a nice little open sesame to Verity's jail door. With luck, it won't backfire and turn us into space debris. With luck." Roddy piped up, scratching at his scalp. "Last time you said that, we ended up with a fire in the galley. Just think of it as adding some warmth to our lives," Rook quipped, his focus unyielding. "Last time I checked, I prefer my warmth without third-degree burns," Roddy grumbled. "Stop whining and start praying," Rook ordered, his fingers a blur across the keys. Ivo Cairn, having observed the proceedings with a diplomat's practiced calm, finally stepped forward. "Perhaps there's another way to—" "You're either in or out, Ivo," Rook interrupted, not in the mood for bureaucratic dithering. "We've got no time for indecision." "Fine," Ivo replied with a resigned sigh, "but if this goes south, I'll deny everything." "With your track record, I can't see it going any other way," Leon chimed in, unable to resist a jab. Rook's plan was a mix of desperation and ingenuity, the kind of plan that seemed brilliant in the heat of the moment but would likely be torn apart by sober reflection. Fortunately, sober reflection was a luxury they didn't have. With the debugger now hooked into their patchwork network, Rook initiated the sequence. The room held its collective breath, as if exhaling might be the final straw that broke the camel's back. In their cell, Verity and Marla were startled by a sudden click. The door, previously as unyielding as a tax collector, swung open with a creak that echoed through the cramped space like a sinister laugh. "Looks like someone's decided to play the hero," Verity remarked, masking relief with defiance. She stepped through the opening, her mind racing through contingency plans faster than a politician backtracking on a promise. "And not a moment too soon," Marla added, palming her sidearm with renewed purpose. Emerging from the cell, they quickly took stock of their surroundings. The corridors were eerily silent, the kind of silence that screamed trouble. "Now what?" Marla asked, her eyes scanning for potential threats. "Now we find out if our rescuers are as smart as they think they are," Verity replied, striding forward with the air of someone who had decided she had nothing left to lose. The base was a labyrinthine nightmare, corridors twisting and turning like some fiendish child's toy. Verity's mind worked overtime, calculating probabilities, pathways, and pitfalls. She'd always been good at solving puzzles, but this one had a tendency to bite back. Meanwhile, Rook and his team had managed to establish a tenuous connection with Verity's comms. Her voice crackled through the speakers, a welcome sound in the chaos. "Nice of you to drop by," Verity said, her tone wry despite the circumstances. "Couldn't leave you to have all the fun," Rook replied. "What's your status?" "Alive, armed, and slightly pissed off," Verity reported. "But we've got a problem. There's a flaw in the alien tech. It's rigged to overload if tampered with, and by the looks of things, someone's already started the countdown, of course," Rook muttered, glancing at Leon, who immediately started typing, trying to pull up any information that might avert the impending disaster. "Think you can stop it?" Roddy asked, half hopeful, half resigned. "If we can find the right frequency, maybe," Verity answered, the emphasis on maybe underscoring the uncertainty of their situation. "Then let's get to it," Rook said, determination lacing his voice. "Leon, Roddy, see if you can recalibrate our systems." "Verity, Marla, find that control panel and give it a good old-fashioned kick in the guts." "Roger that," Verity replied, the line going dead as she and Marla moved deeper into the base, their footsteps echoing in a synchrony of resolve. Navigating the corridors was like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube with your eyes closed, but Verity's mind was wired for this kind of challenge. Each turn held potential disaster, every shadow a possible threat, but they pressed on, driven by necessity and the knowledge that failure wasn't an option. In the control room, Rook and his team worked like men possessed, their focus unyielding. Data streamed across screens in a chaotic dance, the digital equivalent of a symphony gone wrong. "We've got something," Leon announced, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "A potential override code, but it's risky as hell, since when has hell stopped us?" Roddy replied, setting to work with grim determination. As Rook fed the code into the system, he spared a thought for Verity and Marla. Their chances were slim, their success uncertain. But human ingenuity had a way of defying expectations, and if anyone could pull a miracle from the jaws of disaster, it was them. Back in the depths of the base, Verity and Marla found themselves before a panel that hummed with menace, lights blinking like a Christmas tree on a seedy street corner. "This the one?" Marla asked. "Looks like it," Verity replied, inspecting the array of buttons and screens. "Now let's see if we can convince it to play nice." With a shared glance of determination, they set to work. Fingers flew over controls, eyes scanning readouts, minds racing through possibilities. The flaw in the alien tech was an insidious trap, a ticking time bomb waiting for one wrong move. But Verity had always thrived on the edge of disaster, her mind a razor-sharp tool that cut through problems with precision and flair. Marla stood by her side, ready to provide the muscle if things went south. As the minutes ticked by, the pressure mounted. Systems buzzed angrily, protests echoed through the metal corridors, but Verity and Marla remained steadfast. They knew the stakes, understood the odds, and refused to back down. Finally, with a final keystroke, Verity triggered the override. The panel hissed, the lights steadied, and the silent countdown halted, like a predator suddenly robbed of its prey. "Did we just," Marla began, "stop the end of the world?" "Looks like it," Verity finished, wiping a sheen of sweat from her brow. "But I wouldn't count on it staying stopped for long." Back in the control room, Rook received the update with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "You did it," he announced, his voice tinged with awe. "Told you we were good for something," Verity replied, the banter of familiar comfort amidst the chaos. As the team regrouped, a flicker of hope danced through the base, fragile but undeniable. They had bought themselves time, a precious commodity in this precarious game. Yet the shadow of Ivo's ambitions loomed large, a reminder that the real battle had only just begun. But for now, in this moment, they dared to believe that human ingenuity might just tip the scales in their favor. Rook set the debugger aside, his mind already racing ahead to the challenges looming on the horizon. "All right, people," he declared, the words a rallying cry, "let's see just how far we can push our luck." And as they prepared to face whatever lay ahead, the team knew that no matter the odds, they would meet them head-on, their spirits unyielded by the darkness. The corridors of Research Base Elysium were as welcoming as a tax audit from hell, and twice as depressing. Verity Astor and Marla Chan navigated them with the kind of determination usually reserved for rats in a maze, minus the cheese. The only reward waiting at the end of this labyrinth was a confrontation with Ivo Cairn, the bureaucratic mastermind who'd set this entire debacle into motion with all the charisma of a traffic cone. "Remind me why we're not shooting our way out of this," Marla grumbled, irritation coloring her voice as she checked her sidearm for the umpteenth time, still loaded, still useless in the grand scheme of things. Shooting was easy, solving the mess not so much. "Because murder might be satisfying, but it's notoriously bad for your career," Verity replied, her tone dry as dust. "Besides, we're here to prove a point, not make a bigger mess." "Right," Marla sighed. "Diplomacy." "My favorite, think of it this way," Verity quipped. "At least you can still shoot him a dirty look." The comms crackled to life, Rook's voice cutting through the stale air. "You two still in one piece miraculously?" "Yes," Verity replied. "Tell me you've got a plan that doesn't involve us being turned into space dust." "We've managed to shut down the countdown," Rook said, a hint of pride in his voice. "But Ivo still has leverage. He doesn't know we've neutralized the weapon's flaw. That's our ace." "An ace with a joker up its sleeve," Leon added, ever the pessimist. "Remember that, and remember you owe me a drink when this is over. Or 20, Roddy interjected with a chuckle that was more nerves than humor. Verity smirked, the banter a lifeline amidst the uncertainty. "We'll try not to die before settling our tab." "Good luck with that," Leon said. "Just remember, if Ivo offers you a drink, it's probably laced with something unpleasant." "Duly noted," Marla replied, grinning despite herself. "I'll stick to water." Verity ended the call, her resolve steeled. They had a weapon Ivo didn't know was useless, a fact she intended to exploit with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. They arrived at the control center where Ivo held court, looking every bit the smug puppet master. The room was sterile, a shrine to function over form, with screens that blinked ominously like they had a secret to keep. Ivo stood at the center, flanked by a couple of goons who looked like they'd been hired for their ability to take a punch rather than think. "Ah, Doctor Astor," Ivo greeted, his smile as warm as a freezer burn. "And MS. Chan. I trust you've enjoyed your accommodations." Verity mirrored his smile, all teeth and no sincerity. "I've had better holidays. How about you shut off your little toy before it blows us all to kingdom come?" Ivo chuckled, the sound grating like nails on a chalkboard. "Oh, but that's the beauty of it. I don't need to. It's beautifully self-sustaining." "About that beauty," Verity said, stepping closer, her eyes locked on his like a wolf sizing up prey. "It's more like an ugly disaster waiting to happen. We've figured out the flaw. Your weapon's as potent as a water pistol without the plug." His smile faltered, just a flicker, but it was enough to give Verity the satisfaction of having landed the first blow. "You're bluffing, try me," Verity challenged, her voice cool as ice. "We've got the override. You've got nothing but a countdown to disappointment." Ivo's facade cracked, arrogance giving way to something more primal. He glanced at his goons, who looked about ready to start questioning their life choices. "You're lying," he insisted, though the edge in his voice said otherwise. "Sure," Marla chimed in, "and my granny's a cyborg." The goons shifted, uncertainty painted across their faces. Ivo's grip on control was slipping faster than a greased weasel. "Face it, Ivo," Verity pressed. "Your plans collapsed like a badly made soufflé. The only thing left is to do some good for change." "A noble sentiment," Ivo sneered, though the bravado had lost its shine. "And what do you suggest?" "Handing over the keys to the kingdom. More like ensuring the kingdom doesn't blow itself to hell for a start," Verity countered. "The alien tech isn't a gift. It's a time bomb. We're offering you a chance to be remembered as the man who saved us, not the idiot who nearly got us all killed." Ivo hesitated, the gears in his head turning with all the grace of a rusted cog. The realization hit him like a slap, the truth undeniable. All right, he finally relented, sounding like a man who just swallowed a spoonful of vinegar. Show me. Verity didn't waste a second, gesturing to the nearest console. The team back in the control room had set up a live feed, ready to project the data they'd gathered, the proof of the weapon's instability. The screen flickered to life, displaying the raw, unfiltered truth. Graphs and symbols danced across the display, an elegant tapestry of impending doom. Ivo stared, the blood draining from his face as the enormity sank in. You see, Verity said softly, her voice devoid of mockery now, just honest conviction. We're all in this together whether we like it or not. The only way forward is to fix what we've broken, not make it worse. Ivo nodded, a ghost of his former self. The arrogance, the bravado, it all crumbled, leaving a man facing the weight of his choices. What do we do? He asked, sounding more human than he ever had before. Work with us, Verity replied, extending a hand. We've got the brains, you've got the means. Together we might just stand a chance. As Ivo clasped her hand, the control room erupted in cheers, the team celebrating the unexpected victory with the gusto of prisoners freed from a life sentence. You did it. Rook's voice rang in her ear, elation and disbelief mingling. I don't know how, but you did it. Never doubted us for a second, Verity replied, though the smile on her face said otherwise. She turned to Marla, who looked pleasantly surprised. Well, I'll be damned, Marla said, holstering her sidearm. Guess there's hope for us yet. Don't get too comfortable, Verity warned. We've still got a mountain of work ahead, but at least now we're climbing it together, Marla added, her tone lighter than it had been in days. With Ivo's cooperation, the technology's threat was neutralized. The weapon disarmed before it could bring about the end of everything they held dear. The factions within the base found common ground, united by survival if nothing else, pooling their knowledge and resources to ensure the tragedy never repeated. As Verity and Marla left the control center, exhaustion tugging at their limbs, they knew this was just the beginning. But it was a beginning forged in the fires of adversity, a testament to the indomitable spirit of the human race. Drinks? Marla suggested, a hopeful lilt to her voice. Why not? Verity agreed. We've earned it. They walked on, heads held high, determined to face whatever challenges came next head-on, confident that as long as they stood together, they could bend the universe to their will, or at least die trying. As they made their way down the still unwelcoming corridors, they couldn't shake the feeling that this wouldn't be the last time they'd be called upon to save their skins. But for now, amid the cacophony of victory and relief, they let themselves enjoy the fleeting peace. Next time, Marla said, let's save the world before our coffee break. Verity chuckled. Next time, let's fix the damn coffee machine first. And with that, they stepped back into the fray, ready to tackle whatever fresh hell awaited them in the grimdark beauty of space. The aftermath of chaos always smells like burnt circuits and singed ego. The air in research base Elysium was thick with it, a fragrant reminder that technology and ambition don't always mix well. Verity Astor stood in the control room, surveying the wreckage of what was supposed to be a peaceful research mission. Instead, it had turned into a circus act without the safety net. Rook Talon, the master of turning electronic spaghetti into coherent coding, was fiddling with the debugger. It had saved their skins more times than a parachute in a free fall. He looked over at Verity, his expression a blend of relief and disbelief. Well, that was a fun trip through hell. Next time, let's avoid the scenic route, Verity said, poking at a monitor as if daring it to malfunction. And maybe pack a lunch that isn't sandwiches made of stress and desperation. Marla Chan, ever the pragmatist with a penchant for sarcasm, was parked in a chair, feet up on the console as if she owned the place. You mean you didn't enjoy our little bonding exercise? I hear near-death experiences are great for team morale. Verity chuckled, though it felt more like a wheeze. Yeah, we're practically a family now. Dysfunctional with a side of insanity. Leon the Brain Kessler, whose skepticism had been both their curse and their savior, was busy analyzing the data they'd salvaged. I knew we'd survive, he muttered, though his tone suggested he'd placed bets against their odds. Mostly because I haven't finished reading the latest mystery novel. Priorities, Leon, Verity said, shaking her head. The universe can crumble, but heaven forbid you miss a plot twist. Roddy Flint, the geneticist who made social awkwardness into an art form, was trying to look busy. Is it too early to start drinking? Or do we need to pretend we're responsible adults for a bit longer? Responsibility is overrated, Marla quipped. But let's save the celebratory booze for when we're sure we're not about to blow up again. Ivo Cairn, now stripped of his delusions of grandeur, shuffled in the corner like a damp rag. Turns out, realizing you almost ended the world has a way of deflating your ego. So, what now? He asked, voice as thin as his self-esteem. Now, Verity said, we rebuild. We make sure this base isn't just a monument to human stupidity. Rook chimed in, still tinkering with his beloved debugger. And maybe we figure out how to turn this alien tech into something less. Explode why, is that a technical term? Roddy asked, his eyebrows climbing his forehead. Sure, Rook replied with a shrug. Explode why, adjective. Tendency to go boom when poked. The room buzzed with the kind of energy found only in the aftermath of narrowly avoided disaster. It was the frantic rush of relief that came with second chances, the kind of second chances you needed a miracle to get. Ivo, now more human than bureaucrat, cleared his throat. I'd like to apologize for all of it, Marla snorted. Apology accepted, as long as you swear off villainy and stick to paperwork. Consider it done, Ivo said, managing a wan smile. Great, because I quite like not being vaporized, Verity said. It's a lifestyle choice I intend to keep. As the team settled into the inevitable debrief and damage control, the base began to show signs of life. Monitors blinked back to steady rhythms, systems hummed with potential rather than threat, and everywhere there was the sound of rebuilding, both physical and metaphorical. Think we can steer this ship without hitting another iceberg? Rook asked, his gaze on the patchwork of wires and screens. It's what we do best, Verity replied. Navigating the cosmic mess with duct tape and hope, Leon looked up from his analysis. I've run the numbers. With the right precautions, we can stabilize everything. Turn Elysium into a real center of research, minus the part where we almost die, Verity nodded. Let's make sure it happens. We've got a second shot and I'd rather not waste it, optimism from Verity. Marla teased. Must be the post-apocalypse euphoria talking, or the exhaustion, Verity returned. Don't get used to it. Despite the banter, there was a shared understanding that they'd walked out of the fire stronger. The world was still a mess, but it was their mess to fix. And for the first time, it felt like maybe, just maybe, they'd come out on top. Ivo, now functioning as a surprisingly cooperative ally, stepped forward. I can get us the resources we need. Elysium's reputation might be tarnished, but with the right spin, we can turn it around. From villain to PR savior, Marla commented. I like it. Let's not count our chickens before they are hatched, Leon said. Or in this case, before they are genetically engineered. Roddy perked up. Genetic engineering that I can help with, see, we're already in business, Verity said with a smile. And who knows, maybe we'll even get that coffee machine fixed. Now that's a dream worth fighting for, Rook added. With a plan forming and alliances solidified, the team got to work. It was time to turn Elysium into what it was always meant to be. A beacon of knowledge at the edge of space, not a ticking time bomb. As they dispersed, Verity lingered behind, gazing at the monitors where chaos had once reigned. The journey had been brutal but necessary. She felt a strange sense of peace, like she'd finally exorcised the ghosts of past failures. Rook joined her, his expression thoughtful. Penny for your thoughts. Just thinking, Verity said, about how we managed to not screw it all up. Mostly luck, Rook replied. And a little bit of genius. Give yourself more credit, Verity said. You're more than a little bit of genius. Rook smiled, and it was genuine. Coming from you, that means a lot. As the two of them stood there, framed by the glow of screens that no longer threatened doom, they contemplated the future. It was uncertain, sure, but also filled with